Okay, so welcome, Alicia. Thank you so much for taking some time today to hang out with us and to share your experience, your pain, your victory, your wisdom, all the things that you acquired by walking through grief. I know that everyone who sees this is going to be tremendously blessed by it, but I just want to say, on behalf of them and on behalf of me, thank you so much for being willing
It's an, it's an
to.
honor to be here. Really is.
Oh, great.
So
Well,
thank you
why
for
don't we
having
just
me.
My pleasure. Why don't we just jump right into it? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with grief and
Mhm.
how it showed up in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a fairly normal childhood. Both parents were in the home. They both worked a lot. And but as a teenager, I started to go down the wrong path. I
Mhm.
started to get into opiates. And pretty soon I was shooting up heroin. So, um, that's what started the path to grief. I'm sure that there was some underlying grief that didn't have to do with an actual death in the family prior to that. Um, but once I started going down that path, my life and my family's life just started to kind of crumble. I went to one rehab at the age of 17 to no avail. And at the age of 19, unbeknownst to me, my younger sister was stealing my drugs, stealing my needles. So I was so out of it most of the time that I didn't notice drugs missing. I didn't notice needles missing. And she overdosed in her own bedroom
Hmm.
while I was shooting up in the bathroom. And we were actually on our way to a mission trip meeting.
Wow.
Crazy, right? Ironically. So I'm in the bathroom and I just needed drugs at this point to be normal. So I was shooting up in the bathroom and all of a sudden my dad starts screaming. It was just me, him, and her home at the time, and knocking on the bathroom door saying, I don't even remember what he was saying, but I opened the bathroom door and he's carrying her down the stairs, just blood running down her face, her nose, and his back. And so he throws her in the car, is screaming at me to get going. Maybe he knew I was high, maybe he didn't. I'm not even sure. But we brought her to the hospital, the closest hospital. She got life flighted after that to a different hospital. I was so high at the time that and I was scared because it was drugs, it was illegal, that I didn't even tell. They were asking me, like, what is she on? Did she do heroin? And I kept saying, like, no, no, I don't know, which
Hmm.
prevented her from getting the right treatment, I'm sure. I don't know. I haven't looked at her medical records, so I don't know if they gave her the right treatment. I don't know if they were that um, if they gave it to her regardless of what I said. But she spent 3 days in ICU on life support, oxygen, and all that stuff. Her lungs mechanically breathing for her. And 3 days later, she had an aneurysm in her brain, which was ultimately what made the final decision to pull the plug, because they said if we could keep her on life support. We can keep her like this for as long as you want, but she's never coming back. She's brain dead.
Hmm.
So June 9th of 2009 was the official day that she passed away. And it's been now 10 years, a little bit over 10 years, that I've been walking through having this new life, also going through the journey of recovering myself and learning to be, I'm now the youngest sibling, building relationships back with my family because I was the one who started bringing the drugs into the house. And so there was a lot of grief in that, obviously, and trauma and stuff to get over and deal with and face head on to
Yeah.
get to where I am today.
Yeah. So how old were you at the time and how old was your sister?
I was 19 and she was 17.
Okay. So pretty close in age.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
did you, when this happened, was that like the wake up call that instantly started going down a path of recovery, or did you just go deeper into addiction because of it initially?
Neither, actually. I think it was a wake-up call maybe to my parents. I believe I was clean I've been clean since she passed away, at least from heroin and opiates. And I originally thought, okay, this is a wake-up call. It's time for me to get clean. I'll be clean. These were my original thoughts. I'll be clean for a year, and then I can start using again, and I can be a functional addict. Because in my head, I was like, I've gotten too far down the heroin addict line. I can be clean for a little bit, start to feel what normal life is like, so I can start to function as a normal addict. My whole idea of getting clean was to function as a normal addict. Doesn't even make sense,
Right. I was gonna say, when did that change?
That changed a year after she passed away, exactly a year to the day. So it took 1 week after she passed away, I went to a rehab, like a standard rehab, a 30-day rehab. That's where I was getting, the methadone and stuff. And so that's where I'm like, those kind of things, I was clean off of heroin, but there was a process to getting clean.
Mm.
And so I did the 30-day rehab about a week later. And then a month after I got out of the rehab, I went to Teen Challenge, which is a 13-month program. I flew out to California, enrolled in that, Monterey Bay, California. A year later, to the year date, I was able to get a flight back home to spend the year anniversary with my family. One of the roommates at Teen Challenge was going to be in Ohio at the time, and she had never had the East Coast heroin. So we were trying to devise a scheme to, hey, let's meet up. We're going to be 30 minutes away. Like, I still have my hookups. I can get you some of the good stuff. You'll know, like, your life will never be the same again. This stuff is so good. And so we were talking about that. But one night I was thinking about it, I'm like, whoa, what if I go back and I die on the same day a year later that my sister did? And that thought is what shook me. That thought shook me, and I was like, I can't do that to my parents. Like, they're devastated. And from that moment is when I decided I'm going to be clean. I'm not going to do this. Like, there's no way I'm going to go back.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you're super logical. It's your reasoning mind that is like running the show. So when did the emotions of grief show up? Like, did you start to process through that when you were in rehab, or did it not show until later? Like, talk a little bit about that.
That showed up in rehab. So I was very logical about my decision to be clean, very logical in the decisions I make. The emotional side of things has always been a challenge for me. I feel like because was raised in a scientific home, everybody, for generations had been scientists. Even my grandma's a chemical engineer from Europe, so I've just been taught that. The emotion side, it's showed up a lot, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. During my stay at Teen Challenge, I became part of a local church, and they had a grief group. So I started going to that, and I was definitely a mess. Like, I would cry a lot there, but I was also very logical, so they didn't really know what to do with me. Here I'm this 19-year-old, like, trying to get clean. I cried fairly often, and it showed up in waves. Like, while I was in Teen Challenge, there's a lot of, you're working through the steps, you're meeting with counselor once a week, you're meeting in group settings multiple times a day. And in the in-between time, I would normally just be in my bed, either crying or sulking or just wanting to be alone. And being alone in the Teen Challenge setting, it was like one long room, and there was 7 bunk beds in a row, which was 14 beds total. So you're never really alone. You're just kind of not being talked to or not engaging in conversation. So I would kind of stay to myself and deal with my emotions that way. It was Teen teen challenge is very biblical based. So I would read the word over myself a lot. I started to go to school once I got to the phase to be able to, and that education turned into my, what's the word? It almost turned into my coping mechanism, and it almost actually, it was to a big degree a fault, because I started to, okay, if I just fill my life with having to think logically, I'm not going to have to think about the emotions. But I remember one day distinctly, I was in Spanish class, and so this was only about a year and a half after my sister passed away. I was in Spanish class, and we were running over basic questions, and the question was, are you the youngest or oldest child? Or what are your siblings' names is what it was. And I literally got up, walked out of the room, and just like, I couldn't go back for 30 minutes. I just sat there crying, because I was like, how do I respond to this? Like, what are your siblings' names? Like, do I tell them I had a sister who died? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just couldn't, in that moment, I couldn't grasp how to handle such a basic question.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely showed up in waves, and I did go to a support group to help handle it. At that time, I was going to the support group during that Spanish incident and encounter, and I brought it to the support group. The support group met once a week, so I brought that incident to the support group, and it was very enlightening, because then it opened up a conversation where turns out that a lot of people had those very similar experiences, where just like these random, very basic daily encounters just like kind of create a monsoon of emotions that just sweep over you, and you don't know where they came from, how they showed up, how to deal with them, what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of the things that a lot of people find surprising. And my biggest frustration with grief is that you can't schedule it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's say, well, Tuesday at 7 p.m., I'm going to be sad about this. And then
I'll be free, so if it's in well, like,
it does not work that way, unfortunately. But I think it's the most frustrating part for grief, but it also is one of the things that makes you stronger and so much more in tune with who you are, because you learn, kind of not by choice, but you learn that you have to have a little bit of ebb and flow and give and take. You have to have flexibility with yourself and with your emotions, and when you feel up to things and when you don't feel up to things. For me, at least, because I'm very similar to you, and like, I'm a list person, and I'm want to get things done and follow a schedule or whatever, but I've had to learn to be like way more relaxed with myself and my plans and my schedule, because I have to make room at time for this thing called grief. I was up, I can't just ignore it, because ignoring it only leads to worse things. So learning how to sit with it, I call it sit with it, how to let it come and have expression. But then the trick is to not stay in that place.
Stuck.
Yeah, if you would have left that classroom and not been able to go back or whatever, then that's where it would be harmful and destructive in your life. And so how to kind of dance with it a little bit, how to give it room to express, but not be the one leading the dance, maybe, like that you're still in charge, but you're giving it place. And that really is a gift in life in general, that can learn to handle conflict and relationships, stress with that kind of approach and rhythm. It really is helpful in so many other areas. Have you found that like by walking through grief, it's like actually in other areas?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I'm a checklist type person, and I'm very analytical, and I try to be more reasonable than anything. I struggle with arts. I'm definitely more on that logical side. It's actually brought me to a place where I feel I'm now more connected with humanity, because I feel the depth of humanity in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only person who's lost a sibling, and I didn't lose my child. My parents did. And I know you lost yours. And, so it definitely brings a depth of connection to humanity. But it helped me find that I don't want to say fine line, that might be the wrong word, but there is that line between suppressing your emotions versus being overtaken by them. And
Right.
there is, I do believe that there is a big gray area, and you start to find which side of that gray area, your personality and your situation, where you fit best in that. And that's, I
Hmm.
think, where the grief journey has helped me find that line, which is ultimately going to be helping me walk other people through hardships, different hardships, but through hardships that I have found resonate really well with me.
Yeah, well, and even just navigate your own, whatever else shows up in your life in later seasons, and that's
Mhm.
good language to use and its boundaries, right? So
Yes.
if you're thrown into grief and you're not familiar with boundaries or knowing what you need or advocating what you need, like you will learn how to do it, or
Mm-hmm.
press and you won't deal with your grief. But like it's such a training ground for just getting in tune with ourselves and being aware of
Mm-hmm.
our soul needs and what,
Mm-hmm.
or just the grit and gumption to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even though it is hard. Like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
that come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just great. And so I love these interviews and testimonials, because if somebody's watching this course and they're like, month one into it and they're just overwhelmed and can't,
Mm-hmm.
it's all they can do to get out of bed in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
them to hear someone farther down the road and like recognize the gifts that and the skills that they develop in the midst of that,
Mm-hmm.
they can look at it without despising it. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to be like, to wish you weren't in that situation or wish you weren't having to do that. But when you
Yes.
recognize that it's actually making you a better version of yourself, it actually is making
Mm-hmm.
you stronger. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm so excited for folks.
Yeah, I feel like one of the best kind of imagery, and maybe it's just that it hit at the right time, or I heard it at the right time, but when I heard that, grief is kind of yes, it's missing the person, yes, it's grieving that they're gone, but it doesn't affect that person. In a way, it's you dealing with your emotions, and it doesn't affect the person's legacy per se. um and it's once you can recognize that, like, it's okay to find these emotions and to find yourself, that it is an internal battle, that this external thing that happened, like, the legacy can live on, and it will live on, and who that person is set, and it's an internal battle that you're dealing with, which is good, because it's, wow, this is me, this is my emotions, I'm grieving them because I'm sad. I'm allowed to be sad. I'm
Yeah.
allowed to miss them. I'm allowed to want them here at home right now. And they're not. And I'm sad. And I'm claiming and I'm saying that I'm sad, and that's okay. And realizing that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have these emotions. But again, not being like my mom, for example, she's never gotten out of that grief. So my
Mm,
sister's room 10 years later is still the same. It took her
wow.
5 years to move her book bag from the front room, or from the front door.
Wow.
And so it getting stuck in something, being comfortable in, if you get too comfortable in, like, it's me, 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 my grief is me, 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 it could be really weighty. It brings on a pain that's not needed. And it brings on a place that nobody can reach you. I think the best thing that you can do in grief is, yes, you do need your time alone, but to allow people to speak into you, and allow people to even just sit there in silence with you, and say, and allow other people to say, hey, I've been in a grieving situation. I don't know how you feel, because every situation's different, but I know how I felt, and I know that it hurt me, and I'm here to give you a hug. I'm here to sympathize with you, and allow them to do that. One of the biggest thing that hindered my mom is she still to this day says nobody knows what I feel like.
Mm,
She's placed herself in this box of, nobody can talk to me, nobody can sympathize to me because this is my pain and nobody else has ever dealt with this, which is in a very, in a very specific sense true. But in a broader sense, there's many people that have lost children. There's, especially to overdoses, that's, a really big cause of death today. And allow a community to come around you to say, like, I'm here for you, even if I don't understand exactly what you're going through.
There were so many good things in there that you just said. So, the first thing is, like you said, to honor your feelings, to acknowledge them and be okay to be sad. And I think the converse side of that coin is to like be okay to be happy too.
Yes. Yes.
So many people stuck in they're sad because they feel like somehow if they don't stay stuck in this place of loss and hurt and pain, that means that they didn't love whoever they lost or that they want for their life. And so to own, yes, you're sad and you miss them, but you can move on. They would want you to move on. That's what they would have for you. And so it's so good. And your mom, we need to get your mom this course because
yes,
honestly, what she's doing is what I did, when my mom took her life a year and a half before I lost my son. And when that happened, I was like, nobody understands. And nobody around me did understand because nobody lost their parent, and went to a suicide support group. And unfortunately, everyone there understood, but no one there was living. Like everyone there was like barely functioning, if that, a lot of them couldn't work. They were very disabled by this in their life. And so I went to that group and I'm like, wow, they understand, but I want to be able to get out of bed in the morning, so it wasn't for me. I didn't find good role models there that were like living a victorious life. And so it wasn't for me until I saw someone speaking on stage that had endured the Rwandan genocide and like shared her story. It was so horrific and so tragic that wow, somebody's been through something, worse, for lack of a better term, or bigger than what I'm facing, and she's okay, so maybe I can be okay. It's so hard to like have those examples, and that's entirely like what the purpose of this course is and these interviews, so that people can have so many examples, whether a child or a parent or a sibling, or whether it was from illness or addiction. Like we just want to have a lot of examples so that everyone can find people to relate to and know that they can get better. And if they'll let the grief do its work, they can become a better version of themselves, on the other end. So
and that's so good. I definitely agree with that. Finding people, like I said, the grief group at my church was one of the main things that helped me get through and helped me like put words to what I was feeling, helped me identify. And it's like, oh wow, so it was a group. We did have a facilitator, we did have a book, but we also had a DVD that we watched, and we watched little clips. And it's like the DVD was 5-6 years old, and I'm like, they're speaking 5-6 years ago what I'm feeling just right now, so it must be true. You know what I mean? Because it's already happened to somebody else. They've already put words to it. It's not like they're and it's on a DVD. Like it must be real. So allowing people to speak into your life and finding those people and getting that support is a big deal. It really is.
So speaking of that and people speaking into your life, what if you could think of like what was one great piece of advice? What was something that somebody shared with you that was just tremendously helpful as you were processing through?
For me, since I am such a logical person, just hearing it's okay to allow the flow of emotions to go through. Don't, especially initially, you don't need to try to suppress them. Like if you're in a grocery store and you see like the box of cereal that reminds you of your loved one and you break down, it's okay to run out of this store. Like you don't need to finish your shopping list if you can't, it's okay to get into your car and cry and get home, get on the phone with somebody, journal to yourself, it's okay to do that stuff. And you need to go through it. You need to allow those flows to happen. So that was the best advice I got.
Well, since it's been 10 years for you, what do you or your family, what do you do? Do you do anything to celebrate? Well, celebrate is the wrong word, but like your sister's, when your sister's birthday rolls around or the anniversary of her passing, do you guys do anything to acknowledge those days or not?
Um,
How are those days
no,
for
we
you?
don't because of my mom. It's not something that it's ironic how it works because she wants to be stuck in her grief, but she doesn't want anybody to speak of things and she doesn't allow anybody else to celebrate.
Hmm.
So it's unfortunate, but it's kind of been um it's almost turned into one of those things that the family just doesn't talk about.
Hmm.
So, and my whole family lives in different states. So my parents live in Pennsylvania, I live in California, my brother lives in Utah. So it would be difficult. And we've lived in different states, even since before her passing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that touches on something that is really hard to face and understand and accept. But the truth of the matter is, like, we're not islands. And so how well or how not well we deal with this grief doesn't just affect us. It affects our
Mhm.
entire family, you know, and especially parents, the hardest thing is like for parents who have other kids, like, you know, you lost a child, but if you have other kids, like they still need a mom, they still need a dad, like they still
Mhm.
be emotionally available and healthy and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Mhm.
I'll never forget as long as I live, like when we found out, when it was finally confirmed by the police that Quentin had passed away, the first words out of my daughter's mouth were, "Mom, you're not going anywhere, are you?" Like,
Wow.
of the way that my mom passed away, like her first
Yeah.
thought that I wasn't going to be able to handle it, and that,
Wow.
and like, so
And that's
just,
hard.
you know, that stays with me. That will stay with
Yeah.
me for the rest of my life. And that's part of why I'm so burdened to have
Mm.
people do this well, because their stakes are too high. If you
Mhm.
handle grief well, the price for it is huge. You know,
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
several people that I've interviewed on these interviews who went into addiction. You know, I
Oh, wow.
know
Mhm.
people that weren't struggling with addiction, but they lost someone close to them. They weren't equipped to deal with it. And so
Yeah.
they attempted to numb the pain and went
Mhm.
addiction, which then caused all these other problems. So
Mhm.
big, you know, need. I think there's not a lot of help support or training. So I'm so
It's not.
thankful that you found, you know, you had a good support group at your church and you were able to get
Mhm.
help there. Unfortunately, I think that's the
It's
exception
rare.
goes to the
It
rule,
is
you
rare.
know? So
Yeah.
like,
It was a mega church, so they had just their hands in everything. And there's not every city, has a big church like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe it would be the same, you know, the best advice that you got would be the same advice you pass on, but I want to give you the opportunity, like, so if somebody's walking through this and they're new or it's the first time, like, if you could give encouragement, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I would say that you allow yourself to feel the emotions, and allow yourself to recognize if you've become too comfortable in them as well. If it's been 3 or 4 years and you are still running out of the grocery store when you see that cereal, it's okay to get one-on-one help. It's okay to talk with somebody. Some of the people in the grief group that I was in, they were actually in there for, I'm sorry, can you hear the beeping in the background? Let me close this window.
Some truck is backing up.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's probably still there. Um, it's okay to get the one-on-one help. Some people that were in the grief group I was in were in there for deaths that had happened 10 years ago. And they were still dealing with the same emotions that I was dealing with. And because they had never
That's the part that scares me. That's the part that scares me about support groups, because if you're still going every week
Mm-hmm.
years later and you're
Yeah.
experiencing the same, if your experience is the same, then
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that the support group isn't really helping, you know?
Yeah. I think that these people, it was their first time in a group that they thought that they could deal with it on
Oh,
their
okay.
own.
Yeah.
because there was only I want to say there was like 7 people, so it wasn't a large
Yeah.
group, but it does show, like, if you meet up with the wrong group, a
Right.
group that's not healthy, or if you bring yourself as a loner and try to do it on your own, those things aren't, that's not the way we're designed. We're born into families for a reason. And if
Yeah.
our own family isn't healthy, we still need to find that family somewhere else.
Yeah. That's so good. And that's what I encourage people is, we have to be in community, but we have to be picky about that community because the
Mhm.
community is just as detrimental as no community, So
Mhm.
if a support group is what, people are thinking to be helpful, like go a couple times, ask questions, be
Mhm.
intentional to see, are people walking in victory there? Or is it a place where people just want to commiserate and stay stuck?
Mhm.
And to have no apologies whatsoever if it isn't the right place for you. I encourage people,
Exactly.
if your home church offers a grief group, like don't feel obligated to go just because it's at your home church, like
Exactly.
shop around, for lack of a better word. You have to
Mhm.
be an advocate for yourself and really know
Mhm.
what you need and go find it, and don't rest until you do, because the stakes
Yes.
are too high. If we
Yes.
deal with this stuff, it's hugely destructive in your life. And so
Exactly. I
that's
could
why,
share just a, sorry,
no, go
just
ahead.
a quick little tangent on what was mentioned way earlier in the beginning. Is if I never returned back to the classroom, that Spanish classroom that I had to run out of because they asked my siblings' names, if I never returned back, like right now I have a master's degree, I'm a registered dietitian, I'm on a mission to, help people with their physical health. But if I never walked back into that classroom, to be honest, I don't even know if it was the same day. I think I waited until the class was over, everybody left. I went and grabbed my books. I told the professor I'm sorry, but I said I'll be back next class. Right? So I didn't force myself to go back in. I didn't force myself to like calm my emotions in the time frame of the classroom, but I went back and I said, no, like this hurts, but I'm not gonna let it ruin me. Like
Yeah.
what good is it to have 2 dead people, to have me alive but walking around dead, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure.
So
And that's such a tragedy. Like, that's such a tragedy for you and your family, and then for your sister's honor. Like the best thing that you can do to honor your sister, which you've already done, is like grab hold of sobriety for yourself and go on
mhm,
to do amazing things. So that's amazing. That's,
mhm.
well, I'm trying to see if there's anything else we didn't cover. I think. What about, actually, we didn't talk about this, like what was one thing that you found surprising, like one as you started to go through grief, that you were caught off guard or didn't expect, or something?
Hmm. I feel like my surprise maybe came later on, probably like 5 or 6 years later. Um, the first thing that really comes to mind, I had other things that like thought of, like, when I was thinking about, oh, what about this scenario, what about that scenario, but really I was on a study abroad in Mexico with some other students, and we were talking, and I although I did go through support groups, and and I had my sobriety group of people, I was now in a group of people that were normal, who
Hmm.
had gone through a normal life, who went from high school to undergrad, in just a very seamless type way. And I always felt like I didn't fit in with normal people because of my
Mm.
past and because of, the depth that I felt I had a connection with humanity. But coming to find out, and talking with people one-on-one, that they had similar tragic story, not similar, but they had tragedies that brought them to their lowest low emotionally.
Mm.
And surface level, maybe it wouldn't seem like it's a very tragic, or a situation that would cause a lot of grief to me, because my situation might have been deeper. But allowing myself to connect with them in a human to human way and be like, wow, like you've gone through this stuff, and although your low might be different than my low, that's something that's also traumatizing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the biggest surprise to me, was seeing other people's different trauma and being able to connect to it. Like, I never thought that I would actually be able to connect to it if it wasn't like a drug addict, or, you know, or a sibling loss, which are, there's a lot of those people to be able to connect to, unfortunately. But being able to bring myself into other scenarios and say, like, wow, I sympathize with you. I'm glad you got over it. Or not, that's a bad word, not got over it, but I'm glad you were able to work through it and learn different depths of your own self, different limits of your own self. I'm glad you were able to learn your own boundaries. What can you teach me now that you've gone through that?
Yeah.
What can I teach you because I've gone through something different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Like, it's all relative, you know? It's all,
Mhm.
whatever is the worst thing you've been through is the worst thing you've been through. Like, it's the
Yeah.
best mountain that you've climbed in your life. And
Mhm.
when you climb a really big mountain, you have appreciation even for people that are climbing smaller mountains, because
Exactly.
it's all about the climb, right? So
Exactly.
a
Exactly.
little or a lot, like, you can have an appreciation for the thing that is climbing, and I think that's so awesome, like, to have the humility to recognize that, regardless of the size, that you can learn from each other, that
Mhm.
they have wisdom and experience that they've gained that they can share with you, and
Mhm.
inevitably you have things that you've experienced that you can share with them. So that's a beautiful way to look at it and to move forward. I love that. See,
Cool.
things come out of this.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't expect that to come out, but that just
uh,
popped into my head, and I'm like, wow, that was a big surprise to me. So,
yeah. Well, and that's the whole point of this entire course, is to put on new perceptions, to learn to look at it differently, to learn how to walk through it and away from it differently. And so, learning from the situation that we're in, but then being able to learn from other people as well. So
Mhm.
that's one that I'm gonna hang on to and put in my back pocket for sure.
Cool.
For sure, for sure. Well, Alicia, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thank you for sharing your story. What was your sister's name?
Faith Hannah Youlton.
Faith. Well, I'm sure Faith is pleased and proud, and her legacy lives on. And now anybody that sees
Mhm.
interview and purchases this course gets a little taste of Faith in their life, and her legacy will continue on through their stories and their victories as well. So
So cool. Thank you.
yeah,
It's such an honor to
yeah,
be here.
my pleasure.